The pastor invited them to a conference. When they got there, they saw a lot of popular, powerful pastors. Pastor Paul told them that will be their story if they are willing to make certain sacrifices. Without any hesitation, they agreed to whatever he wanted them to do. That night, they were initiated into an occultic organization. A whole lot of powerful pastors were in attendance, chanting and singing. Many years ago, there was a girl named Maria. She was a simple girl from a humble background. She was well known in the community as an obedient child, often leading the Sunday school classes and other church activities. Prayers were her best activities, to the extent her mates nicknamed her Mother Teresa. Maria grew up and still followed the path she knew best, the ministry. She sang and ministered with a voice that kept people at a standstill. Her dream was to get married to a powerful pastor or be a pastor to a great ministry. But things took a twist when she crossed paths with Thomas, an unbeliever she invited for service. Thomas and Maria became very close, despite him being aware of Maria's passion for the church. He did not believe in the power of the church, but rather saw the church as a business he would like to venture into. Knowing that Maria would not comply, he convinced her that he had found God and he was told to go into ministry. Maria was so happy, and they began to gather congregation for their church, which they named Omega Fire for Power. But things did not go as planned. People were not coming despite Thomas's constant research on sermons and Maria's angelic voice. One day, a very rich and popular pastor named Paul came to their church, and after service, he walked up to Thomas and Maria and told them that he could see the bright future in the church. However, things will remain so if they did not do the needful. Thomas and Maria begged him for his help. The pastor invited them to a conference. When they got there, they saw a lot of popular, powerful pastors. Pastor Paul told them that will be their story if they are willing to make certain sacrifices. Without any hesitation, they agreed to whatever he wanted them to do. Pastor Paul invited them for a meeting. Thomas and Maria, in desperation to succeed, honored the invitation, which took place at midnight. That night, they were initiated into an occultic organization. A whole lot of powerful pastors were in attendance, chanting and singing. Maria sacrificed her ability to conceive in exchange for a powerful voice, while Thomas sacrificed his ability to sleep at night for miraculous powers. After the ritual, the member of the court congratulated them and welcomed them fully. The next Sunday, people started filling up the church. Maria's singing drew all the passerby to the extent they all forgot about the church they were going to. People often cried when she sang and ministered, after which Thomas would come preach and perform miracles. Soon, others heard of the miracles. They rushed to the church. It did not take long. The permanent construction of the church started, and in the space of 3 months, they moved to the huge space where they had several services. Thomas was soon nicknamed Apostle Sharp Sharp because of how fast his miracles were. He had members rushing in with gifts such as money and even cars. Not too long, the church doubled in number, and in one of the crusades, Thomas shared water and mirrors to the church members, which he sold for a ridiculous amount of money. The highest bidder got the biggest mirror and water, but unknown to them, these were devices to monitor what was happening in their homes. The water he shared were to cause problems, which he saw in the mirror. He would call out members during service and give them the revelation, leaving the entire church in utter shock. On one occasion, he saw a couple fighting over their family issues. The next Sunday, he called the woman and told her that her mother-in-law was the cause of her problems, stating that she was a witch. The woman shouted and started rolling on the floor, believing every word that came out of Apostle Sharpsharp's mouth. He further asked her to sow a ridiculous amount of money to liberate her from the bondage, which she did without wasting time. The woman went home that day and wreaked havoc on her mother-in-law, making her husband to send her out into the streets. After a while, Maria became very uncomfortable with what they were doing. She confronted Thomas and asked him to stop using God's name for false prophecies and deceiving people. This was not the reason I started ministry. We have to leave this cult and stop with this evil before people get hurt, Maria said to Thomas. Thomas tried to convince her, but her mind was made up. Thomas felt threatened. He reported the situation at the meeting, and they told him to tame Maria before it gets out of hand. Thomas agreed because his church business was growing, and he was not willing to let go so quickly. He did exactly what was instructed and used Maria to get more powers by sacrificing her. Maria suddenly disappeared. She was no longer seen in church or anywhere. This grew the suspicion of one of the church members named Oge. She had been noticing strange atmosphere in the church, as she was a very strong Christian too. Oge took her investigation very serious, as she became desperate to see to the bottom of the case. Meanwhile, not only was Apostle Sharpsharp using dark powers, he was also sexually involved with his female members, often referring to his sperm as the holy fountain that would cleanse their spirits. One day, a very beautiful girl named Sarah came to the church with her mother. Sarah had just returned from overseas. When Thomas spotted her in the congregation, he brought her out and gave her a prophecy that her best friend was jealous of her, stating that she was responsible for her not getting married. "Right on, Papa," the crowd hailed as they expressed their shock. "I will have to perform 7 days fasting and prayer for you, my daughter. But you have to show your dedication by sowing a seed so that God can hear your prayers." Thomas asked her to bring the sum of 1 million naira, else the bondage would not be able to break. Sarah and her mother quickly did as instructed. And later that day, Thomas went into his office and started laughing as usual. Sarah and her mother stormed her best friend's house and gave her the beating of her life, calling her a witch and accusing her of all the negative things that were happening in her life. Apostle Sharp Sharp continued like this and ruined a lot of family and friendships. But no one doubted him, apart from Oge, who was now keeping a close watch on him. One night, after hours of praying, Oge encountered Maria in the dream, where she told her everything about the powers and affairs of the church. In the dream, she narrated how she was killed and where she was buried, stating that Thomas was responsible for it. Oge woke up terrified. She had never had a dream as clear as that before. She prayed and fasted before she decided to visit where she was told. To her greatest shock, she found Maria's shallow grave at the bush in one of Thomas's properties. Oge took a video of it. This confirmation made her to believe everything she heard in the dream. Oge needed to get the ring on Thomas's finger because according to Maria, that was the source of his powers. She had no choice than to pretend to be one of the ladies interested in his miracles. All she needed was to get close enough to snatch it. In one of the services, when Thomas mentioned a prophecy, Oge immediately ran out before anyone could. She put on a show, falling to Thomas's feet, and when he attempted to lift her up, Oge grabbed his hand and, mentioning the name of God, she snatched it out of his fingers. Immediately this happened, Thomas began to change to half human, half serpent. The congregation took to their heels and ran away. Oge began to pray seriously. A few faith-driven people stayed behind and joined her. After an hour of intense prayers, Thomas changed back to human and began to confess everything he did, including Maria's death. When Oge was certain that he had become powerless, she handed him over to the police, but he died on his way to prison. The congregation were shocked after Oge narrated her encounter with Maria. We should all be vigilant to know that not all pastors are from God. Please, brothers and sisters, let us learn to know God for ourselves instead of falling victim of fake prophets. She said to them as she urged them to stop seeking desperate miracles. Due to the sacrifice and the blood that was shed on the church, the government seized it and destroyed it. The people learned a great lesson, and all those who were giving false prophecies went back to seek forgiveness from those they offended. But Pastor Paul still went on deceiving desperate believers. This is the end of this story. There are many lessons we can all take home today, but let me leave you with a few. Firstly, unlike Maria, we should all pray for lost souls, but be vigilant and draw a thin line at some point, because only God can truly save people. Secondly, desperation often attracts the devil, making it easier for him to gain access. And lastly, no good deed goes unpunished, and God can never be mocked. Thank you for listening to today's story. Do you think situations like this still happen in the world today? Leave a comment below and do not forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories. We love and appreciate you, and I would love to see you in our next story.